TFVC Political Director Michelle Evans recently appeared on Texas Scorecard's Real Texans. Get to know Michelle and her journey from mom to vaccine choice advocate in this fascinating interview.
Your organization has achieved a significant dent in vaccine mandates.
We didn't do the science. We didn't do the clinical trials. We didn't do the post-safety. But one thing we know it's rare.
Now our struggle is for people to apply that criticism, that critical thinking to the entire vaccine schedule. Have you thought about the MMR, the same way that you've thought about COVID? Have you looked into the fact that none of these vaccines have been tested in combination? And have you thought about the fact that year over year, we're just adding and adding and adding to the point where now between the time that you're born and the time that you turn 18, you're supposed to have 81 doses of various antigens in combination vaccines or individual vaccines. And that's really eye-opening for a lot of people.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to real Texans? Thanks for joining Real Texans. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan. We have real conversations with people who are doing great things to make the Lone Star State better. I'm sitting here with my friend Michelle Evans, who is, I don't want to say, Michelle, that you're the most unlikely activist, patriot type, but you're kind of the most unlikely activist. Your story of how you got into all this is a little different. One, you went to UT, which, as Nagy says, you should be like, out hawking copies of Marx out on the street corner or something, right? But no, you graduate from UT, you're kind of heading off into a kind of a normal career. But then you got bit by the bug, but not because of taxes or other things, but because of a special needs child. Tell me how that pulled you in.
Yeah, so I did graduate from UT. I was in social services for 8 years, I think. I worked in New York City and Brooklyn, and then came back to Texas, started a family. My second child regressed after her first birthday. She was eventually diagnosed with autism. We started to recognize that there was a series of protracted adverse events to a vaccine that she received when she turned 1. And almost immediately after she was diagnosed, I started to dive a little deeper into the various causes, some that are recognized by mainstream media and some that are not, and found myself at a conference speaking to other moms who were critical of the vaccine schedule and had kind of blown the whistle on what was going on that so many people were not talking about. And so from there, I was kind of radicalized into this movement about vaccine safety. Did some DC work as part of a film, being a research assistant on a film called Vaxxed. Went to DC and talked to some lawmakers there. But then suddenly, I got a call in February of 2015 that Jason Villalba, a Republican representative out of Dallas County, Republican, had filed HB 2006, which would have prohibited parents from filing reasons of conscience exemptions in Texas. So basically all you would have is a medical exemption to vaccinations required for public school entry in Texas. And there were 3 of us that decided we were going to kind of form a group and get involved, but I was the closest to the Capitol. I had my parents down the street that could watch my kids pretty easily. And so I found myself there kind of teaching myself as I went along. I didn't even know who my representative was. I didn't know who my senator was, but I taught myself how a bill became a law and became close to some very important liberty-loving representatives at the time. And then from there, we formed Texans for Vaccine Choice.
Yeah, so and I want to be real clear about something. Both you and I've had these conversations in the past. Texans for Vaccine Choice, when talking about this, y'all aren't anti-vaccine. You're anti stupidly following rules that might not be in the best interest of your particular child.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah.
It seems like we all want to pay lip service to the idea that, you know, everyone is fearfully and wonderfully made, that everyone's an individual, that God gives everyone different strengths and weaknesses, all these kind of things. But yet, but on, you know, at exactly the 132nd day, thou shalt, you know, be injected with this. I'll say, wait a second. What if it's not right for my kid?
Yeah.
That's a pretty important distinction, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, keep in mind that Texans for Vaccine Choice formed in 2015, way pre-COVID. So anti-vaxxer was the pejorative that was used on a regular basis and tried to discredit what we were saying just by using that term. We've never made any kind of recommendation about how you should or shouldn't vaccinate your child, which vaccines are better than others. We just say, here's the schedule. Here's the reality of these vaccine manufacturers who enjoy complete immunity from liability and how that affects whether or not these safety profiles are legitimate or not. And that ultimately you are the parent and you have the say over what medical procedures your child undergoes.
As you kind of look at this kind of progression over the past 6-7 years from when you guys started, and now it's a little fringy, to now, and in many ways thanks to COVID. There are a lot of people saying, wait a second, what are we doing here? Does it strike you as strange that, little Michelle Evans was on the front end of this stuff? How surprising that to you?
Well, we said for a long time at the very beginning that it's going to take adult mandates for people to actually wake up. And that's exactly what it took. It took the federal government putting its thumb on the scale and saying, either get vaccinated or you're going to die this horrible death, this winter of discontent. But
winter of death and misery something like that.
Right, yeah. Please die. That's basically it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. These, you saw the Canadian trucker convoy, people rose up, adults rose up and finally said, no, hell no, not for me and not for my child. Now our struggle is for people to apply that criticism, that critical thinking to the entire vaccine schedule. Have you thought about the MMR, the same way that you've thought about COVID? Have you looked into the fact that none of these vaccines have been tested in combination? And have you thought about the fact that year over year, we're just adding and adding and adding to the point where now between the time that you're born and the time that you turn 18, you're supposed to have 81 doses of various antigens in combination vaccines or individual vaccines. And that's really eye-opening for a lot of people. I like to think that the work that we did from 2015 to 2020 kind of put us in a better position as a state to respond to COVID. A lot of states that are not nearly as free as we are, and there are many that are freer, but they suffered for a lot longer than we did. And we can criticize what Governor Abbott did, and believe me, we have, and we will continue, but we are better off, or we were in a much better position than we would have been had a group like Texans for Vaccine Choice not emerged previously.
Yeah. But, of course, what makes you kind of the, forgive me, the odd animal, is that, you're this, it may not be quite so odd that, a parent sees their child with a problem. So I want to do something out of the community to help others who might be in a similar situation. That's how a lot of groups get started, right? But you've gone a little further, currently serving as the chair of the Williamson County Republican Party, one of the largest counties in the state, one of the largest. Still, I guess you can nominally say we're a Republican county.
We are red.
You're a red county, right next to Travis County. Sometimes that bleed over come across, I guess. Yep. Which party politics is kind of icky. Why get involved in party politics? You had a good thing going.
Yep.
Focus on an issue, helping families and kids. And what is the possible tie between those things?
As I got more involved with politics, with Texans for Vaccine Choice, I realized there were a lot of issues that meant a lot to me. Many issues that emerged in the last 4 to 5 years, including gender identity ideology and other school focused issues, school choice. So I'm not a one-trick pony, and I wanted to be able to get involved in all aspects. And obviously, Republican is the party that vaccine choice fits comfortably in. But all the policies that matter to me fit comfortably in the Republican Party as well. I could have easily just been a precinct chair and not really done much, but I saw that our county was far too quickly becoming more and more like Travis County and less like Tarrant County. And we needed like a hard 180 if we were going to recover and put us in a position where we're not having to beg for scraps for the next generation. And I'll be living here in Williamson County for the next at least 8 years. I've got 3 kids in school and have no plans to leave. So I needed to make sure that Williamson County was comfortably red. And we're getting there. We're not super, super red, but Trump won and he lost in 2020. Cruz closed his margin of, he closed the margin of loss in 2024 compared to 2018. So we're making our way there. And I could, like I said, I could have just sat back and watched it all happen. Obviously being a county chair is very time intensive. You take a lot of flack from all sides. I fully anticipate being primaried by both my left and my right. So it's not what most people consider fun. Like you said, there's a lot of ickiness, but I've learned to compartmentalize a lot. None of this is personal. Nobody truly likes you. Nobody truly hates you on any given day. But to keep this focused on policies and values.
For a normal person,
not me.
Well, yeah, for not you.
Yeah.
but you have to talk to normal people, right? How do you explain to a normal person why they should do this abnormal thing of get involved in politics and policy?
Because nobody else is going to do it for you. And that's sort of what I learned with Texans for Vaccine Choice is that we 3 women had to be the ones that got together and organized this pushback to what happened to eventually to be about 15 bills that were filed that would have restricted vaccine choice in some way in that one session in 2015. There was nobody else that was going to fill the void. There were a lot of people that said that they were interested, a lot of people that said that they would do this, that they would do that, and ultimately would not show up. A majority of the people do not put in the sweat equity that's required to change what you see as wrong in the world. So it's either going to be you or nobody else, and you're going to just be spinning your wheels. I appreciate the input that everybody has. Everybody has a role to play. Some people are better off just sending an email and not doing face-to-face contact, things like that. But ultimately, if you really, really want to affect change, it's going to have to be you.
For kind of almost definitionally, most people don't live in driving distance from the state capitol. Right. Most people, don't have any kind of relationship with their state rep, state senator, member of Congress, U.S. senator. Mm-hmm. How are ways though that those folks can still be effective? Because you hear this like, oh my gosh, I've got to get to know my U.S. senator to be effective. I have to drive to Austin every day. I've got another job. What can those folks be doing?
I would say get tapped into organizations that represent the values that you hold dear and pay attention to what they're asking you to do. For example, Texans for Vaccine Choice will send out action alerts and we'll give you a blurb that you can copy and paste, or you can make up your own, give you the emails to send them to. And that just amplifies our message when I go to the Capitol and say, hey, this bill needs to be killed, or you should push this bill through to committee. All of that groundswell of support helps us when we go to the Capitol to lobby. I hate to use the word lobby, but to lobby. But if you aren't able to go to the Capitol all the time, pick one day out of every other year to go there and just be a presence in your legislator's office. Make sure your legislator knows who you are by name. Make sure that that's on a friendlier basis, then you may be inclined to communicate with them, just because they're going to begin to drown, your voice will be drowned out if you continue to just angrily email them over and over again. You sound like an unhinged person. And it may be all, valid, but there's just a way to communicate with people if you want to be effective, and that's not it. But take the time. There's not going to be anybody that's going to have your exact same message. There's not going to be anybody that has your exact same story, and that's what we encourage. We do a few citizen engagement days each and every session where people are able to go to the Capitol with our one-pagers or with some guidance and teams, but they get to talk about their kid's story, which resonates with so many of these legislators or their staffers. And that's unique and that's powerful. So use your voice and your unique story to your advantage. There are people that do listen. I know that everybody kind of goes into this thinking like, there's no use, we can never change anything. And if that's the attitude that you take into it, yeah, you're going to be completely ineffective. But everybody, like I said, has a role to play, but you have to be your own voice.
When you think of the issue of vaccine choice, and you think of kind of the progression to now we're entering an era with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. leading the FDA, or depending on what the Senate does, leading the FDA. The fact that someone like that's even considered RFK Jr. isn't my cup of tea, and not most people's cup of tea. But then he is someone willing to ask really unconventional questions. Right. And in some ways, that's kind of what you're encouraging people to do, is to be willing to be yourself, tell your story, and ask the questions.
Right. I mean, if our organization had not come to be, then we can question whether or not all of these things would be happening, because we get calls from other states saying like, what is your formula? How are you? And this was happening when we were just a ragtag group of moms. We were mad moms in minivans. We didn't have a 501c3 or 501c4. We were just kind of, running around like chickens with our heads cut off, but we were doing a good job of what we wanted, of what we intended to do. So people from California were calling us, people from Florida saying like, how do we duplicate this? Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to take credit for RFK being named of head of HHS, but certainly people understanding that they could do something and making their voices heard has had an impact. Otherwise, we would be, repeating the same old regulatory capture issue.
You said something interesting. Maybe I want to ask you about, to kind of dig down here. You said maybe, I could have just stayed a precinct chair. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So for normal people, what does it mean to be a precinct chair, and why is that position actually a fairly important one in the context of politics?
It's the most hyper-local elected position that somebody can hold. So it's somebody who lives in your neighborhood and is supposed to, not most don't, but is supposed to educate you about upcoming elections, supposed to give you information about candidates, help you get registered to vote. And they also vote on important issues within the county party. And then ideally they become a delegate and go to the state party and help direct the party's policy statements and platform and et cetera. But again, it's the most important local elected official because they are the most tapped into the party. And they live right there. So they're supposed to be the people that knock on your door, 2-3 times a year, ideally. And we go to these monthly meetings that are, somewhat organized.
That's on you.
Yes, that is on me.
County chair, that's on you.
Where we pass resolutions to send messages to our legislators or send messages to the state party about how we feel about particular issues. We have committees to help advocate for the legislative priorities going into the 89th session. So precinct chairs are extremely important. They're just extremely unknown. Most people don't know I didn't know what that was 4 years ago. Even as a political activist, I had no idea what a precinct chair was, mostly because my precinct chair never came to my house. But
for many folks, that becomes if you're if you think you want to do something, but you're not really sure you want to leave your neighborhood, that's actually not a bad place to get started, is it?
It's a good place to, it's a good way to get your toe dipped into the shallow end.
And even be very effective over the long.
Yes. It's just a really dedicated volunteer for the party is essentially what it is. But you do get to have an impact on what your local county party decides to do. You talk about the budget of the local county party, how that budget should be spent during campaign season. So it is an important role, an extremely important role, more important in some aspects than the county chair role. So.
As you look back over this kind of path from being a mom with a special needs kid to now the chair of one of the largest Republican apparatic parties in the state, along the way helping form an activist group, do you think back and say, gee, this is not the path I thought I was taking when I signed up for freshman year in the School of Social Work at UT?
It definitely wasn't the path I was taking when I was, I was working collections and Honda Finance. Like I've done a lot of different things in my lifetime as a career or as a job. But I have learned to go with the flow. And if I see something that needs to be done, I'm the person that steps up and does it. I'm somebody that doesn't like to sit still, and I don't like to sit back and watch other people try to do things that I think that I could do better. That's just completely honest. But I do really enjoy politics, as psychotic as that seems to some people. Like I very much enjoy the ins and outs, the relational aspect, the games of chess that are played on a regular basis. I love going to the Capitol and the vibe there. So hopefully I will get to remain in politics for the near future. In what respect that might be, I don't know. I don't really predict beyond 2 years. I've learned not to.
Outstanding. Right. Yeah. Well, Michelle Evans, thank you so much for sitting down, having this conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this conversation with Real Texans, helping you make the Lone Star State shine brighter.
Thank you for listening to the Shot Callers podcast. Please, if you found value in this content, rate us and share the podcast with a friend. It's a great way to get the message out and to empower everyone to make informed decisions. Until next time, never forget, we are the Shot Callers.